Let me welcome all of you to the 7th Future Trends Forum. I'm delighted to see new people. I'm delighted to see people who have come back for a return visit. I'm very excited to hear your opinions and your thoughts as we move forward. Those of you who haven't been here before, welcome to the Shindig environment. This is an environment where we get to use all kinds of different functions to communicate. At the very top of the screen, you should see two different boxes, medium-sized. One is me waving at you, and the other one should have a slide in it that says FTTE. This is the stage, and this is where presenters will be, and some of you as we go. If you look at the bottom part of the screen, you'll see a whole bunch of icons. Some of them will have images, some of them will have video feeds, and those are all participants from all over the world. Now, and you can see them as we go, they'll be moving back and forth as they join and connect with each other. If you look on the bottom right of the screen, you'll see two bright orange buttons. One is a raised hand and the word raise. And if you click that, it'll tell us that you'd like to come up on the stage and ask a question. If you don't want to do that, but you still want to contribute, click the ask button, and that will send us a text with a question or a comment, and I can read that out loud. And if you'd like to text everybody as a whole, click on the chat box and chat like so. And that way everyone can hear you. And if you want to chat at individuals, grab someone on that chat box and just chat right at them. And if you're on Twitter again, please tweet away. Just to introduce you to the event, Future Trends and Forum is a project of the Future Trends and Technology Education Project. That's my monthly report where I do an environmental scan about trends that look likely to have a strong impact on the future of education and technology. It's been going on for a few years, so we have some longitudinal information. Next slide, please. Just want to let you know that FTTE is generously sponsored by NYSERNet, New York State network organization, who have been supporting us very kindly, and we thank them for that. Next slide. Speaking of support, Shindig is supporting us in all kinds of ways. They're providing this technology that we're using right now. They're providing wonderful folks like Jeffrey and Christopher who are doing yeoman work of trying to make sure everything is working. And we thank them very much for their contributions to the forum. Couldn't happen without you guys. Next slide, please. Now, today's guest is Deanna Marcum. And I'm very, very pleased to have Deanna on this show. Professionally, she is the managing director of Ithaka SNR. If you don't know Ithaka SNR, you owe it to yourself to follow them ruthlessly. They produce research, among other things, into education and its transformation in the 21st century. And every one of their reports is meticulously done, very, very nuanced, and turns out to be very influential. I strongly recommend paying careful attention to Ithaka SNR. In the past, she was the associate librarian for the library services for the Library of Congress. So I could think of almost no one better to speak about the future of libraries. She was awarded the very prestigious Melville Dewey Medal. And before that, she was on the CLEAR organization and helped make it what it is today. So if you'd like to find more information about her, you can see a couple of links there in the slide. And as well, on the far edge of the screen, you can see a ship with an oarsman. That's the Ithaka SNR logo, and that'll take you to more information about it. Now, let's bring Deanna up on stage.
Everything's
Good morning, Deanna.
Good morning, Deanna.
good morning, Brian.
I'm so glad you could be here. I'm so glad you could be here.
Thank you so much for the invitation. I'm really pleased to be joining you this morning, and I'm fascinated by this technology platform. It's really nice to see how it works. It's my first experience with it, so thanks for that too.
Oh, we're glad to have you on board. Just to get things rolling, today we're going to be talking about two different areas. One of them is the future of libraries, and then we're going to take a look into some recent research from Ithaka SNR about the attitudes of faculty leaders towards education right now. And just as a kind of visual aid, let me just pick up the camera. I am speaking to you from a public library in Vermont. This is Public Library's Media Lab, where in the middle of this sleepy little town in bucolic, Vermont. You can go online, get high-tech support on multiple platforms, and do an awful lot of work with digitization, digital storytelling. So this is my visual aid to support the cause of libraries. Let me ask Deanna, you referenced a wonderful article, which I'm going to put in the chat box, called The Library Card, which is speaking about the services that libraries provide and where they continue to keep providing such services. And they're broken down to three categories: education, technology, and community. Let me ask first, if we think about public libraries, how do you think they can best provide those services in the
future? Thank you, Brian. One of the things I was so intrigued by Fallow's short little piece, it followed on her husband's article about what's happening, some of the good things that are happening in forgotten cities in the United States. And they traveled to many different places looking at the good things that were going on, despite some really difficult times in those cities. And she had a little piece at the very end, and she said, the center of all of these cities that are having such a hard time is the public library. And she talked about those three things that they're doing, the education, the technology, and the community. The public library, I think, has become a community center in so many places. They're understanding that there are people who need help with technology and have no place to go to get that help. They understand that people are trying to educate themselves for better jobs, for being better parents, for being better citizens. They need access to electronic resources by and large. There's still leisurely reading, there's still story hour, but maybe that's part of the community side of things, where people come together and discuss ideas and find new ways to think about what's going on in the world. So I think public libraries are doing an absolutely fantastic job. And you see that all across the country. And it's interesting, you're in a little town right now in a public library. Think about all the people who are independent scholars, who are just trying to learn something new. The public library is the place that can happen.
That's very heartening, and so matches my assessment of what's going on across the U.S. and the library world. And I was asking you that about public libraries, and you give a nice picture of how they can enhance a community's engagement with technology, education, and community. How about academic libraries? Do you see them having a similar threefold function going forward?
Well, I think the situation in academic libraries is quite different. And one of the things I'm thinking about a lot these days is what kinds of services should academic libraries be offering? When you think about the academic library for at least a century, almost all academic libraries have been striving to be more like Harvard. There's just this model of what an academic library should be, and they're all trying to get bigger and add more collections, to be more prestigious. And I think that day is actually behind us. Trying to collect as much as you can really doesn't make much sense anymore. So much is available online. And the store collections continue to be extremely important. Local collections that meet local needs, yes, they continue to be very important. But the bread and butter collections, they're mostly available. Google and the internet really changed everything about how academic libraries operate. So we've been thinking much more about how universities and colleges are differentiating themselves as they are trying to serve very different markets now. And there continue to be colleges and universities that are focused primarily on the 18 to 22-year-old and then graduate students. But there are so many universities and colleges that are now thinking about adult learners, non-traditional learners, online learners. They're coming up with very different configurations of how they're providing education. And I think that means libraries are going to have to differentiate themselves too and begin to think much more about how they support their parent college or university. And that may mean thinking about very different services. When you think about what recruitment, retention, and completion, those are the things that they're focused on in different ways and in different degrees. But libraries can probably be most helpful if they start thinking about the services they provide that help their institutions do those things. Question before I keep going. I could go on a long time about this topic.
I understand it's a huge topic, and I appreciate your answer. On the flip side, though, I wonder if libraries were to help with the academic mission and the student life mission of, say, student recruitment, retention, and completion. I wonder to what extent libraries then end up competing with or being seen as redundant on campus. I mean, if we already have programs doing that, and if we go back to Fowler's threefold argument, we already have technology on campus, central IT, academic computing. Obviously, education is something that is central to the academic mission, and community is served by many, many services on campus, ranging from student life to Greeks, if those who have them, to student activity centers. How does a library on campus differentiate itself out and make itself not redundant but unique or essential?
Well, I think what the library continues to do that is unique is it's the best resource for helping students understand what's out there. And that if you pair the library and the librarian's knowledge of information resources, where they can be obtained, how they can best be used, how students can make better judgments about what's useful, what isn't, and you pair that with the other services that are offered on campus, it could be really powerful because the advisors, for example, are going to help students figure out the courses they should take. But paired with the services of the library in thinking about what information resources do I need to understand in order to do a better job with this topic? How can I really prepare myself for a career in X? I think that's really the kind of service that I'm thinking about. Not that the libraries take over advising, but that they add the information piece to these other services. And I think that could be really helpful to a lot of students who are having difficulty.
Add the information piece. That's a great slogan, I think. A couple of years ago in Australia, I heard a talk by the head of the National Science Library at the Chinese Academy of Sciences. It was a very, very interesting vision that he laid out. And he was trying to think hard about what kind of future services a library could offer, especially, as you said, given the rise of collections being accessible through the internet. And he had an interesting idea that the library, especially the research library, would have the function of information entrepreneur, that research librarians would have the job of going out into the community, be it the academic or the public world at large, and try to add the information piece. So they would look for startups, they would look for nonprofits, they would look for research projects ongoing. And as he was giving this talk, you could see the academic audience begin to have convulsions of fear because this was a very, very different model. But I'm wondering, do you think he was on this?
I love that idea. I think it's terrific. And I I talked earlier about students, but also in the research area, the those who are doing research on university campuses have access to an incredible amount of information just by sitting down in front of their computers. And they may think that's enough. Um, I'm really encouraging librarians to become partners with those researchers, become part of the research team, and bring the information piece to the research enterprise as well. I like the idea of information entrepreneur. It's really going out and finding ways to add value. And I guess my only real point is that the days of just waiting for people to come in and visit with us and tell us what they're working on and we could find ways to be helpful. I think those days are behind us. So I love the entrepreneur idea that we're being much more creative about how we make sure people understand the power of information. It's not just finding something that you can use, but really understanding how information can be put to use. Um, that's what we offer.
Well, that's adding that information piece, helping people realize the power of information. I think that makes a very, very big difference. Um, let me uh, let me just pause here for a second and to see um, everyone in the audience. Please, if you have any thoughts about this very, very important question about the future of library services, please feel free to put them into the chat box or to raise your hand or ask using the orange buttons or to tweet at us to see if you have anything that you'd like to add to this. Ellen, it's very, very good to see you asking questions and commenting on this. Um, Thank you, Rizna, if I have your name right, for blogging about this. And Lake Hole, good to see you here. Well, while we're waiting for them to have questions, I can turn and ask you another question about this. Thinking of what libraries have been doing for quite some time, back in the 1980s, I believe, is when the American Library Association came up with the term information literacy and information fluency, way ahead of its time, recognizing that we need to rethink how we find, share, assess, use information in the future. Um, what do you think of the information fluency, also information literacy movement now? How has that changed? Do you see it as viable in the future?
I hope, I don't know if my colleague Roger Schoenfeld is part of the audience this morning or not, but I hope he'll forgive me for talking just a moment about our national faculty survey that's going to be released in just a couple of weeks. One of the most interesting things about that survey is that faculty are now saying in very large numbers that their students need help with information literacy, that they really aren't doing as well as faculty would like, and they see the library as the place for that. it's an interesting finding in that the numbers are so much greater than they've been in the past. One of the things that I think we're all aware of is that we're overwhelmed with information, and in so many different shapes, sizes, and forms. And sorting it out in one's academic career, how to make good use of information is really key to being an educated person. And I think there is a great role for libraries there. The challenge is finding the right time and the right way to aid the student. Rather than, I don't think classes work very well. I know many librarians don't like it when I say that, but often they're being given information when they don't need it, and they're not particularly anxious to have it. So I think the key, maybe this is part of the entrepreneurial piece too, Brian, of finding that moment when the student needs that help, and really can benefit from it. And it becomes a personal growth experience for the student rather than an assignment that has to be checked off. So that's how I would like to think about information literacy. I think it's hugely important. I don't think we have great ways of doing it right now, by and large.
Well, you reminded me of a few things in what you just said. One is a fascinating book I read a few months ago. I want to recommend to anybody, called Too Much to Know, Managing Scholarly Information Before the Modern Age. It takes a look at information overload from about 1400 to 1800. It's a very exciting, depressing, and scary book in a lot of ways, where you see people who, as the printing press takes off, begin to see themselves as overwhelmed with information. And it's depressing because they have no idea what information overloaded. But on the positive side, you see them developing all kinds of strategies and ways to respond. We have a question that just came in. I'll read it. I'm curious to know how the open access movement will shift library services, especially oriented colleges. Oh, sorry, especially community-oriented colleges. That's from Mark Bulette. Hello, Mark.
I've been working on a project for the past year or so with the University System of Maryland. And I've been very interested in an initiative there. The library, working with faculty, this is for the University of Maryland University College. So this is the Center for Adult Learning and International Learning. There are many campuses on military bases across the world. Open educational resources are taught by University College, and created lists of open educational resources. And where they didn't exist, the faculty considered high quality enough, they created open educational resources and embedded those materials into the online learning programs of University College. I think increasingly we're going to see librarians called upon to identify the open access, open educational resources kinds of materials that can easily be embedded into learning management systems and make things more of a package for the students in their coursework. So I do think it's going to have a great impact on the role of librarians on campuses.
Well, in some ways, that's a kind of historical role of helping faculty identify materials, not helping faculty isolate and select materials, but this is a very different one. It's a more expansive one because the OER field is so much broader and so much more technologically driven, especially when you're talking about integrating into the LMS field.
Right.
Carrie from Hofstra has another question. She asks, what role? Oh, go ahead, Deanna. I'm sorry.
No, I said good.
Okay. Carrie from Hofstra wants to know, what role do you see libraries taking in the development of new research tools?
I think that's a really interesting question. Um, Libraries are working hard on research tools that will help scholars, and many of them have proven to be enormously useful. I think the harder role that we have in the future is working with specific faculty in their disciplines and thinking about the tools that are needed that are discipline specific. And I think libraries can, if they are sufficiently uh, embedded with those disciplines, they're going to make enormous contributions. Often the faculty don't know how to develop the research tools. They know what they would like, but they really don't know how to do it. Many of the technically savvy librarians are really good at this, and they combine that great appreciation for all of those knowledge resources that are out there and the know-how to develop the tools. So I think there's a wonderful opportunity there for new services, but I'm generic tools, but really discipline specific. I think that will make a much bigger impact.
So not so much developing a WordPress plugin for everybody to use, but one for biology or one for French.
Well, there are certain tools. I mean, WordPress is probably a good example. That's nicely useful across disciplines, but often what faculty really want help with is working with something very specific to their discipline. And you think about cost and you think, well, more generic things are better. Uh, I'm just thinking about how we can really be contributors to the scholarly enterprise, and I think that's usually at a discipline level.
Well, I think that's a very powerful argument, and that may help give faculty a way to distinguish between educational technology and libraries. But let's speaking of distinction, let's take a moment, take 3 minutes, and let's mingle. Let's have everybody here in these two rooms. Why don't you guys grab a person who looks interesting, if it's Carrie, Nancy, Kevin, Paul B, Amanda, or Ellen. Let's take a couple of minutes and talk about this future of library services, where you see these things. Deanna and I are going to get off the stage for a couple of minutes and we'll join you and move around. And then when we're done, I'd like to ask one or two of you to come back up on stage with us and tell us what else you thought about when it comes to the future of library services. Okay, let's dig in and mingle. Well, greetings, everyone. Welcome back. It's a lot of fun seeing all of you guys swarm together and meet and compare notes. Those of you who I crashed in on, I apologize if I was too loud or if you want to be by yourself. It looks like we've had some discussion that has come up as a result of this mingle session. So let me just bring up a couple from that appeared in the chat box. Liz Evans wanted to know about digital scholarship librarians working with counterparts in IT department, that you have similar areas of expertise and faculty don't always know where to turn. So that is, we have a faculty member and a librarian, a librarian and a technologist who have similar portfolios, how they get to respond and how they get to work with each other. So just in case you couldn't hear, we have a good question from Liz Evans wondering about competing professionals on campus, that there are digital scholarship lanes and then they have counterparts in IT departments. And the faculty might not be sure where to turn since they seem to be similar portfolios. So if we can't get Deanna up right now, let me ask the rest of you guys. We'll hold on to Liz's question right now, which is very important. Let's ask, how about the rest of you? Which of you had a similar observation or related comment? Which of you found another issue about the emerging role of library services? And again, if you'd like, you can click the raise hand button right down there, or you can click the ask button and type out your comment, or you can enter it in the chat room like Liz has just been doing. Let me reference the second topic that we want to discuss today. Now this is, I'll put it here in the chat box. This is a survey that Ithaka S&R did, and it just came out a few weeks ago. And I'm going to give you a little bit of background. Ithaka S&R regularly surveys faculty in higher education, along with administrators, asking for their attitudes towards certain key areas. So a few minutes ago, Deanna mentioned that she would have a survey coming out in just a couple of weeks about faculty attitudes towards libraries. And if you're in the library world, I strongly recommend reading these studies because they're broken down meticulously. For example, they ask faculty in arts and humanities fields, in social sciences fields, in the natural sciences fields, what their attitudes are, and breaks them down everything from their attitudes toward library resources, library spaces, to library portal. It's fascinating, fascinating stuff. But the study that I wanted to ask Deanna about that I just linked to here is a very, very different one. Ithaka set up a panel of about a little more than 100 people, mostly higher education leaders, plus some experts. So leaders are CIOs, CTOs, chief academic officers, presidents, provosts, deans, and asked them about their attitudes towards education moving forward. It's a really interesting and unusual study because there's nothing quite like it. It covers an awful lot of ground. So, for example, when they were asked about the state of technology and what technologies they valued, it was a little different from what you might expect. So, for example, they had a choice of intelligent adaptive learning technologies, competency-based education, technology-focused faculty development incentives, digital game-based learning, and systematic assessments of student learning. And what's interesting was of all of these, it was intelligent adaptive learning technologies that came out ahead. That was the one field which they saw as most promising. So according to the study, they defined them as computer-based and or online education systems that modify the presentation of learning material in response to real-time student performance interactions. So that leads in many ways toward automation or algorithms or artificial intelligence for helping. Think about intelligent tutors, or you can think about projects like Carnegie Mellon Open Learning Initiative, OLI, which has wonderful online tutorials for a great variety of subjects. So that's what came in ahead. What came in next was systematic assessments of learning. So that's yearly assessments and reporting of concrete student learning outcomes based on predetermined programmatic goals and guidelines using direct evidence of student learning. So one example is the University of Pittsburgh, which did some work with this last year, actually over the past 2 years. So that's what the campus leaders saw as most promising. What they saw as least promising was digital game-based learning. There was not a lot of interest in that. So again, this is a pretty interesting forum for the study. Another topic of the study that I thought was especially important was taking a look at what faculty saw and what campus leaders saw as very important about free tuition. And that split people completely in half. Ithaka asked a little about universal free tuition. So such as Bernie Sanders' plan for universal free tuition in public universities and colleges, or Secretary Clinton's idea of a more complex idea of reducing tuition and debt. And the responses were all over the map. Some saw that as a really good idea and should be raced ahead with. Some saw it as really problematic, either saying that it wouldn't do anything to improve education, or that it might end up benefiting the wealthiest people instead. So while we are here, let me mention one more point about this study, which I found really, really interesting. Again, this is taking a look at campus leaders, looking at emerging trends in education, primarily education, but also technology. And one more area they found especially important was looking at things for improving undergraduate degree completion rates. Deanna mentioned improving completion as a possible goal for libraries. Well, they saw two main ways of doing this. One was proactive data-informed advising, and other was guided pathways. So, data-informed advising is pretty obvious. I mean, it depends on predictive analytics and some new data management technologies. But the idea is to help advisors establish individualized academic plans, navigate academic choices, and receive timely, targeted advising interventions. So that's, again, that's where big data and data analytics really combine. And in guided pathways, we've seen this in a few different fields, including community colleges. That presents college courses in the context of highly structured education and coherent program maps. These are aligned with students' goals for careers and future education. So this is a response to the possibility that, on the one hand, students might be overwhelmed with choices, way too many courses, majors, minors, and programs to study. On the other hand, we may have first-generation college students who don't have the cultural capital or background to easily navigate all of those. So guided pathways is a way of making that smoother and simpler. You may have heard of the paradox of choice. That helps reducing that. Now, people have some questions, and so the Shindig will bring these up. So David asks, under the header of provider versus purchaser and sustainability, we talk about the role of libraries for online scholarly initiatives at a university level. Libraries generally don't have enough scale. Well, I won't be able to fully ventriloquize Deanna and David, but I think that's a really good point. On the one hand, there's the scale issue that we have individual libraries, which again are too small to have that kind of purchasing power. But this is where library organizations and alliances really come in, everything from regional library groups to national ones. I think a second point about this has to do with influence with vendors. And again, this is where regional collaborations and national collaborations really come in. My favorite example of this is the Hadi Trust, which is this constellation of research libraries. And Ellen, thank you for sharing the link on Twitter to that study. Now, Paul B. Asks about makerspaces in libraries. Is there or has there been any movement in public or university libraries in implementing makerspaces? I've seen this happening. I wouldn't say the majority of libraries, either public or academic, but I've seen both, from California to Massachusetts. There's partly this is, well, let me step back and go to the article that Deanna Marcum mentioned at the beginning, the library card article by Follows. This is one way for libraries to connect their audience, their patrons, their users with technology, be it pre-digital, analog technology, or digital technology. It's also a way to educate. Right? So this is a way of bringing together the community members with experts in the field. For example, you've seen a lot, especially in Rust Belt areas, you can see people who used to work in industry coming maker spaces to help with welding, or working with tin or woodwork. And the third is a community. And this is a great way to bring people together in unusual ways. I think also for libraries, this is a way of making use of their physical space, which is precious, and its involvement in the community. So I'm definitely tracking makerspaces and libraries very closely. I wonder, those of you who are in this discussion right now, how many of you have a makerspace in your local library, if it's a public library or an academic library? And you can answer either by raising your hand or by just saying something in the chat box. Well, let me just apologize on behalf of the infrastructure of the United States. I'm sorry that we weren't able to get as much of Deanna as we could. This is always an issue across the US, is trying to get the right connection speed to be able to do high-end, media-intensive work like video conferencing. I'm sure you've all experienced this. I want to thank Deanna for coming and for trying so hard to participate and contributing. And I want to thank her local tech support for their hard work and the Shindig team for that. Next week, we have another guest who is a friend of mine and an extraordinary individual who'll be speaking to us from Italy. That's Jim Groom. Some of you may know Jim. He is a pioneer in a few fields. One is digital storytelling in MOOCs. In fact, the Chronicle Higher Education labeled him one of the innovators of the year a few years ago for his major MOOC called DS-106. He is also now one of the pioneers in the domain of one's own movement, and has in fact devoted himself full-time to that, running a wonderful hosting company. And on the side, he's a long-time EduBlog evangelist who has been blogging quite energetically and built quite a community around his blog. So if you go to Reclaim Hosting or to Baba Tuesdays, you can find out more about him and his work. Again, and that'll be next week on Future Transform. You know, if you haven't had a chance to RSVP, this will be next Thursday, 31st of March at 2 p.m. If you would like to ask us questions about it, please contact me directly or via Twitter, and we'll have a blog post up about this shortly. So in the meantime, let me just leave the floor for any questions, comments, observations that you'd like to share. Well, I have one observation to make, and this is one that has come up before, and I think it's one that's very, very important to see, that if we look ahead, trying to understand the future of education, that libraries are a terrific place for this. Because libraries are a community hub, unlike anything else on campus. They have a tremendous amount of information. They also have expertise in connecting people to information. And in my mind, I'd like to see libraries work as future spaces where people can try and get a better sense of what's coming up. Now, we have a comment from Mark Gillette at Duke, and we just read you his thoughts, that there seem to be two different trends that came out both out of the research that we looked at and also from our discussion. On the one hand, we have a drive to get students taking careers, and we want to, this is the model of education as career planning. So you go to college or university and you skill and reskill in order to get a degree that will take you into a job. On the other hand, there's the idea that we want to have a variety of courses, a lot of services available. And it's those two really do contradict and conflict in some ways. Mark, would you like to take the stage and expand a bit more about that?
Hey, Steve, can you put me? Oh, I'm being brought up to the stage now. That was right. Hi there, everybody. Hi there, everybody.
So that's quite a contradiction. On the one hand, we're trying to generate as many options as possible. On the other hand, we're trying to reduce the options.
Yeah, it seems. I mean, I think it seems like this central tension between what students want. They want the a la carte ability to just take whichever courses they feel most excited about, and on one hand, that seems to facilitate students being innovative and sort of integrating ideas and integrating sort of learning spaces and learning resources in new ways that we the adults, you know, the old guard may not sort of have thought of before. But at the same time, they also oftentimes the students want that to go in a very specific track. So it seems like there are these two conflicting sort of desires of the student body generally, and it seems like we talk about universities being pulled in lots of different directions, trying to serve lots of different purposes for the community, for the students, for research. But then, even in terms of developing curriculum, you have these two competing interests that are indeed quite contradictory to one another. So I don't really have I don't have any solutions to that. I just think in terms of thinking about the future, it's an interesting set of problems that clearly, we talk about, institutions becoming further diversified and, increasing heterogeneity between the types of universities. And this may be one of those sets of forces that actually pull universities apart. So you end up with certain places that are more on the Brown University model of a la carte, whatever you want, and then other institutions much more on the we will educate you to be a veterinary technician.
Or a radiologist, or
right.
A French scholar. No, I think that's a very, very powerful point. I mean, we really could. Strategically, there's a lot of discussion about trying to get colleges and universities to narrow themselves down to focus on one thing. So we are really good at foreign languages, or we're really good at music, or we're really good at engineering. I mean, we've had that tendency for a while. I mean, about 100 years ago, we had in the United States, we had professional schools where you could learn typing, for example. They're often run by businesses. So we just may see more of that. That's a terrific point to bring up. I'm going to keep an eye out for that. Thank you. We call this the Hewlett contradiction.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Yeah. Wonderful. Yeah. Thanks for bringing me up. Yeah.
Oh, thanks. My pleasure. Well, I'm going to say Steve, Liz, Ray, Jill, Sylvia, M. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you so much for sticking around. We had a good amount of discussion. We had some solid ideas. We struggle with technology, but we have completed our mission. We will follow this up with an email and a blog post. In the meantime, thank you so much for coming.